It's Monday and you're watching FreightWaves Now. I'm your host and economist Anthony Smith, and I'll be giving a econ shipper update. But first, we're going to go to Michael Vincent with a carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to your carrier update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Michael Vincent. Let's jump into it. Looking at our outbound tender volume index across nationwide versus 2019 in the orange and 2018 in the green. This year in blue, obviously, up there at 15,803. Surged last week, bumping along that 15,803. We expect that surge really to drive forward as we move into the holiday season. It's in full swing right now. Capacity will be tightening, and volumes are certainly moving, and it's at 80 on the DHL right now. If we move forward and look at outbound tender rejects sitting at 26.17, well above the previous 2 years. Last week above 27, dropped down a little bit throughout the week and now has picked up through the weekend at 26.17. Expecting that to really grow. I would think that's going to hit around 27, maybe a little higher as we move towards the holidays, get closer and closer, and drivers want to get home for the holidays, and freight really starts to pick up as the season gets into full swing. Moving forward into our outbound tender rejects by type, we have our reefer in orange, our dry van in green, and yellow is our flatbed. And we see that reefer is at 45.28, still up there, almost half the loads being rejected. And we have in green down here, just under 26 is the dry van, and flatbed at 10.3. So still very strong rejection rates there, over 1 in 4 loads being rejected overall, and almost half in the reefer. If we break this down and look at van versus reefer, we see something interesting here. I've broken it down here on this side. In green is the dry van, and blue is your reefer outbound tender rejects. They're starting to diverge right here as we see a freight mix start to take hold, a shift in the freight mix across the United States as van starts to go up. Keep an eye on that as they have moved in congruence with each other throughout the year, but and certainly as of late, but now they're starting to diverge. If we look at the truck stop, still pressure on the rates going up. Expect that to continue. You've got your reefer in orange, your dry van in blue, and then your flatbed in green. Dry van still going up as well as refrigerated. As we saw earlier, the capacity is still very, very tight. Moving into the markets, the outbound tender rejects are in blue, volumes are in height, and you can see that there's relatively loose capacity out here in the West Coast with high volumes. Same in Atlanta, same down here in the Lakeland area of Florida, center of the country, very tight capacity. And up here in Erie, Pennsylvania as well, as volumes still climb there. If we break this down and look at reefer tender rejections in the color or the blue, and then height is the volumes, we start to see some interesting effects where volumes are quite high in the Lakeland area, but relatively loose, and that effect up here in northern Florida, in Jacksonville and out towards Tallahassee, rejections quite high, even into southern Georgia, as Lakeland and Atlanta are sucking in that reefer capacity into those areas. Center of the country here, Little Rock, getting into Joplin, very, very tight capacity and high volumes within the reefer market. Lots of rejections there, lots of high pressure on rates. If we look at dry van, we have the tender rejects on dry van in blue, and the volume again is in the height, and you can see center of the country up here through Columbus into Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and into the Northeast. Very strong, very tight markets, even down in Louisiana, very strong. Looser capacity out here in the West, but still, again, very high volumes out here. Good place to get some freight. If you're in the Missouri area over here, very high pressure on rates. Looking at ocean, 7 days out, booked shipments still very strong, over 100% over last year. That'll do it for your carrier update. I'm Mike Vincent.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Hello and welcome to your Shipper Econ Update. I'm your host, Anthony Smith, and today we're going to do a little manufacturing update. So the first thing we're going to look at, of course, is the ISM PMI, the Institute for Supply Management Purchasing Managers Index. And so I have that right behind me in this purple line. And as many of you know, the ISM PMI is indicative of what's happening in the manufacturing sector of the economy. So when we're looking at the PMI, anything above 50 is indicative of expansion, while anything below 50 is indicative of contraction. And in the main PMI, we see that there is now a growth rate of 59.3. So this growth rate is actually higher than I anticipated here. So good news for the manufacturing sector of the economy in this latest month, looking at October. In the orange line here, we have our flatbed outbound tender rejections. And so looking at flatbed equipment, this is going to be the primary equipment type that carries these manufactured goods. And so when we're looking at both, we can see the coincidental contraction when we had the onset of the pandemic here in just about March, May timeframe. And we see how that's ramped up ever since then. So we've seen a consistent rise, if you will, in this purple line for the most part for manufacturing. So this is good news overall for those manufacturing sectors. One of the good things about the ISM PMI is that it comes in different components. And so in this next slide, we see the ISM PMI for new orders. New orders is one of the significant releases that I like to look at closely. And we can see in the latest PMI new orders number that the latest number was a 67.9. This is very significant, and 7 points up from the last month's number. So this shows that there are a lot of new orders coming through overall for manufacturing, and this also precedes production. So this telling us that there is more production coming on downstream when we're looking at manufacturing goods. And so what respondents were saying across the board that of course, there was a lot of supply delays due to COVID-19, but a lot of companies are anticipating a somewhat of a strong second wave. So we're even seeing some of the lower stream or downstream manufacturers looking at pulling product forward in order to get ahead of some of these COVID difficulties, because a lot of outlets are anticipating a strong second wave. So a lot of stores or a lot of manufacturers are starting to ramp up production in order to meet those supply limitations. And so this is a very, very, very strong number for the new orders component, and something that's very significant for production coming on down the line. One of the other telling segments of this PMI release was the ISM PMI Employment Index. And so this is one of the indices that was lacking a little bit more. So this is now at a 53.2, now showing that it's in this very strong, not strong, but in an expansion territory. So this might be a bit of a stretch, but what I have in the orange line here is retail sales year over year. But what we have here is showing that typically when employment is low, so are retail sales. Now, the two aren't going to be, one isn't going to necessarily be a leading indicator for the other, but I want to introduce some of the retail sales aspect to it, just because we recently had our latest numbers for the GDP not too long ago, showing that GDP, gross domestic product, was pretty strong for consumer spending. And one of the primary things that really drives a strong consumer is going to be employment. And one of the employment areas that was lacking before was going to be manufacturing. And so we can see this increasing in manufacturing, employment now above 50. So again, showing expansion. And we can start to see that retail sales has been very strong. So when we look at overall retail sales, we're going to really anticipate that, of course, non-store retailers are going to be strong, and that we're going to have a pretty strong, likely significantly high holiday season when we're looking at e-commerce sales and things of that nature. So overall, we're looking at manufacturing. There is some good news here showing right now. And when we're looking at overall retail sales, there is some momentum, of course, with now being the holiday season and e-commerce going so strongly. That's going to do it for this Econ Update, and that's also going to wrap it up for this Monday edition of FreightWaves Now. Thanks so much for tuning in, and as always, you can check out all of our content on all your favorite streaming apps, including Apple TV. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.